In the meantime, and as Elizabeth said in this week's parashah, we continue reading about the experience of our patriarch Jacob, of Yaakov. Only now it happens to be some 20 years later. And so we ask, has Jacob changed in these 20 years while away from home? And what has he, should I say, learned in those 20 years? Does Jacob still believe in God, and does Jacob believe that God is still in that place that he proclaimed last week in our Torah reading? Let's see if we can answer these questions and how they impact us today. After 20 years, Jacob leaves Lavan and returns home. He now has 2 wives, 2 handmaids, 12 children, lots of flocks, and a partridge and a pear tree. Actually, it's really family and lots of possessions. He encountered his brother Esav, and they made peace. Okay, it doesn't mean they had a relationship, it means they made peace. And Esav no longer wants to kill him. And Jacob even won a wrestling match with what we believe to be an angel along the way. And yes, Jacob is a lot wealthier, but in a sense, if you think about it, he's right back where he started. And the Torah points that out to us. Despite everything that has happened along the way to Jacob, he returns to the same place where he started from. And where is that place? And what is so significant about that place? Now, upon his return home, God said to Jacob, "Arise and go up to Bethel and abide there, and make there an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esav." Very nice. Where is Bethel? And why is it so significant? Well, that was the place, the very site, where God had appeared to Jacob in his dream. Remember the one about the ladder and the angels going up and down? At that place, 20 years earlier, Jacob built a monument to God and named it Bethel. It was the place where God had promised Jacob that the land, Eretz Yisrael, the land, would belong to him and his descendants. And he would have many descendants. And they would all be blessed. And it was the place where Jacob uttered those famous words of, "Surely the Lord was in this place, and I didn't know it." Now, although Jacob had doubts about God's protection and tried to make a deal with him, one thing Jacob not only realized but never forgot during those 20 years was that God was in that place. That place, the place where God appeared to him, the place which Jacob now returned to. The question is, why? Why did he return there? And of course the answer is because God was there in his mind. God's presence was there. The promises which he made was there. And it is precisely because Jacob remembered that place and what it meant that God told Jacob to go back there. And when he did, and maybe because he did, what did God do? He changed his name from Yaakov to Yisrael. Why? What does the word Yisrael mean? Yisrael means wrestle with God. And what did Jacob do? He wrestled with the angel. And when he said to the angel said to him, "It's time for me to go." And Jacob said, "What is your name?" And he said, "Do not ask me that." And Jacob said, "Well, you cannot go until you give me a blessing." And what did he say? He said that, "What is your name?" And Jacob said, "My name is Yaakov, Jacob." And the angel said to him, "From now on, it will be no longer Yaakov, but Israel, because you wrestled with God and you remained alive." And of course, what does he say at that moment, Jacob? He lets him go, the angel go, and he says that, Peniel, I saw the face of God and I survived. So, this actually is a very famous story that illustrates a lesson. And I want to tell you to try and bring it all together, to tell you a story that perhaps helps you equate this a little bit better. There was once, the story is told of a man who would go from village to village, from rabbi to rabbi, asking the same question: where can I find God? He was never satisfied with the answer he received. So he would pack his bags and he would move on to the next village. And some rabbis told him, "Pray, my son, and you will find God." The man tried to pray, but he really couldn't. And some replied, "Study, my child, and you will find God." But the more he read, the more confused he became, and farther removed from God he seemed to be. And some rabbis said, "Forget your quest, my child, because God is within you." But the man tried to find God within himself, and he failed. And one day, he arrived, weary and discouraged, in a tiny village in the middle of a forest. A woman minding some chickens asked him who he could be looking for in such a small place. She wasn't surprised when he told her that he was looking for God. She finished her chores, and she escorted him to the rabbi's house. And when he went into the rabbi's study, the rabbi was there pouring his thoughts over the Talmud. The man waited a moment, but the man was very impatient, and he already wanted to move on to the next village because he didn't believe that the rabbi was going to tell him anything he hadn't heard already. And so he decided to interrupt the rabbi. He gave a little cough. The rabbi didn't move. And he said, "Rabbi, how do I find God?" And the rabbi paused, and the man was wondering which of the many answers that he'd already heard was the rabbi going to tell him. But the rabbi said, "You've come to the right place. God is in this village. Why don't you stay a few days, and you'll probably meet God?" The man was puzzled. He did not understand what the rabbi could mean. But the answer was nothing like he'd heard before. It intrigued him enough, so he decided to stay. He stayed a few days, which turned into weeks, which turned into months, and then turned into years. And he became part of the village, and he shared in all its life's activities. He went to the synagogue on Friday, and he prayed with all the rest of the community. Sometimes he knew why he prayed, and sometimes he didn't. And sometimes he really prayed, and sometimes he only said the words that were on the page. And there were times when he would join families for Friday night meals. And when they talked about God, he was always assured that God was in that place, though no one was quite sure where or when God could be found. And gradually he began to believe that God was in the village, although again he was not quite sure where. He knew, though, that sometimes he met God. And one day the rabbi saw him and said, "You have met God now, have you not?" And the man said, "Thank you, Rabbi. I think I have, although I'm not sure how or when." He said, "But let me ask you, Rabbi, why is God in this village?" And the rabbi replied, "God is not a person. God is not a thing. You cannot meet God in that way. But you were so caught up in the questions that you could not hear the answers. And now that you can find God, you can return to your village if you wish." And so the man returned to his town. And you know what? A very interesting thing happened. God went with him. And the man prayed and the man studied. And he knew that God was with him and within other people. other people who sensed that within him would sometimes ask him, where can we find God as well? And he would answer, you've come to the right spot. God is in this place. That God is in this place is the lesson that Jacob learned and kept with him for 20 years. Even when life was tough, and even when he had doubts about whether God or not would keep his promise. And we can learn from Jacob too, to remember that God is in this place as well. No, we can't really expect God to appear to us in a dream and change our names as he did with Jacob, or perhaps give us a sign of even of his presence in our lives. But that doesn't mean that God is not present in our lives either. That doesn't mean that God still isn't in this place, because he is. And we need to remember that he is, and then come back to him and his place in both the good times and, yes, even in the bad times. How? Well, one way of doing this, of course, is through prayer. And one of the reasons we pray is to communicate with God, to thank him and request things from him. But another reason that we pray is to help us realize that indeed that there is a God. And he's right here. He's right here with each of us, all the time. But let's be honest for a second. Even if you come to shul every day for every service, you will not necessarily find God every time you're here. You will not, you cannot fully experience him each and every time that you are here. You have too much else going on in your cup, too much going on in your lives to solely devote to communicating with God. However, every time that you are here, every time you think about God and this place, the chances increase that you will feel connected in some way, shape, or form, and that you'll be inclined to remember to say those words. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. I felt it this morning during Shacharit. I felt it again when Elise was singing for us, the Mimkoma. Surely God was in this place, and I was not aware. So let us continue to remember that God is still in this place and in our lives. Let us keep coming back to this place and to God, even if we are away for a period of time. Because as Jacob taught us, even if we abandon God, as long as we come back, he'll always be receptive and waiting for us, waiting to welcome our return and to keep his promises to us. And may we never forget, whether we're aware of it or not, that surely the Lord is in this place. Shabbat Shalom.